and looking after life systems, looking after people, and returning any surplus we have, material or information surplus, back to the system. So periodically you have national or international permaculture meetings, and it's an amazing degree of agreement between the people attending it, because we all know what we're about. That's the reason. It's a little difficult to define what the permaculture community is. It's not a community which has a hierarchy. It has no administration, has no paid officers. A lot of people find that extremely annoying. Unless you set up a contact point, there is no contact point. But it's a very large organisation indeed. There'd be about 3,000 teachers in English and maybe 4,000 or 5,000 in other languages. And an individual teacher may have taught 6,000 or 8,000 people. So it's not big compared to Bechtel, say, but it's big. It's bigger than the United Nations, the FAO, WHO, and most of the national aid agencies put together, and doesn't cost anything, and there's no administrative cost. So it's pretty weird. The other weird thing about permaculture is nobody claims to know what they're doing. So there's no sense of, you know exactly what you're doing. But if what you do turns out okay, you don't have to do anything. So there's a sort of koan for you. You don't know what you're doing, but if you do something all right, then you're not doing anything. It's very annoying. The whole thing quite annoying. And it is totally disintegrated. You own the word permaculture, the completion of this course, as much as anybody does. And nobody can tell you what to do or what not to do. So don't let them, There's no kings or there's no royal family in this system. Okay.
But when you gave numbers for teachers, does that mean people who completed this course?
Yes, and who have started teaching. Any of you can do that. And any of you should who think they might be able to, because most of us can't teach. We're either no good at it or our knees knock so much we can't do it. And yet people do get up and start teaching. But it is a difficult course to teach, and it's an inhuman course to teach. You teach as many hours in 2 weeks as you teach in a whole of a fourth year of a university course. So that's inhuman and against all rules. But hardly anybody has more than 2 weeks to come. Okay, so now we move on to the principles of natural systems and of design. Design is a curious thing. It's a word in the English language which is not in a classification of any library. Can't go to the library and say, I want to look under design. Doesn't matter what classification is used, it's not there. If you ask people to define design, particularly designers, they don't have a definition of design. And there is none. The only definition of design comes from engineers, and that's an interesting one. They talk about incremental design. You make a water wheel and you measure the amount of energy you're getting out off the axle compared to energy in the water falling across the wheel. And you play around with that wheel for 200 years, altering the curves of the blades, the number of blades, spacing of the blades. And eventually you get up to a very high degree of efficiency, about, in an overshot wheel, 93%. And you can buy that design. And that took 200 years to get up to there, but to get up to 94% would take you another 100 years. There's got to be a lot of insight. And the water wheel, overshot water wheel, is the world's most efficient mechanical device. There is nothing as efficient as that. Diesel engines, 36%, generators
That's the big wheel with coming off.
over the top. Falling through curved buckets, which are 1/5 of the diameter of a full circle, each bucket, and it's all highly specified. They never attempt to design your own water wheel because you go back to about 1700 and it won't be very efficient. I see a homemade water wheel 16% efficient, So incremental design has been defined by engineers, and that's what it means. You make something like a car engine, and you get 5 miles to the gallon, and keep playing with the damn thing and altering materials and injectors, and you get up to 45, 50 miles to the gallon, and then suddenly there's a leap and you get 130 miles to the gallon or something. But as you get close to the limit of efficiency of the fuel, the possibility to increase is very slight. We'll be going into the efficiency of machines and saving energy later in the course. We'll be going into everything later in the course, but there's a little bit of yellow paper here. If you express an interest in something, I picked up quite a lot from your accounts, and I've written them down. We just make sure at the end of the course we've covered them all. But the questions you hear mainly from the floor, or you'll find yourself, will be those that we'll be dealing with tomorrow. But if you have something you're really interested in, we'll put it down here. We'll make sure we get it covered in the course. I want to talk about design. There's only been one real set of principles evolved for design. I'll give them to you now. Everything really is connected to everything else, in fact. And a good designer puts many elements of design to work to support a single important function. If you want to heat a house, you see how many ways you can achieve that till you've achieved a satisfactory amount of heating. But it's basically a fail-safe system. You can heat a house 8 or 10 ways. You can build it to be heated by solar heat. You can heat it, as Bruce's place is, by collecting heat on the roof and fanning it underfloor. You can heat it with radiant heat from massive stoves. You can heat it by trom walls. You can heat it by composting up against the rear wall. You can heat it by putting a flat roof and heaping your hay on top and radiate heat from the ceiling down, as the Turks do. You can heat it by lifting it up and putting all your cattle and hay underneath it and letting the heat come up through the floor like they do in Yugoslavia. And you can, just hundreds of ways to heat a house. But it's not the number of ways you heat it is not so much important, is that you use sufficient number of ways that the house is self-heated. Home heating or cooling a house and providing hot water is 85% of your energy use. And energy use is about 30% of your pocket money. So it's a serious business to build a house which heats and cools itself. In Australia, 5 years after you build an energy inefficient house, you've paid for the whole material cost of the house again in energy. 5 years. So it's 3% extra in a house building to make it energy efficient. And if you pay that to start with, in 5 years' time, you're on a win situation. Some of the figures you get is in village homes where every house has to reach that 85 to 90% energy efficiency level by design, is that the quarterly cost of energy there is $9 about. So it's not really a grave cost.
The quarterly cost of
energy, about $9. Yeah, for a home. Yeah. So it takes you an awful lot of money to have $10 to spend. You might have to spend 40 or something to get that 10. Therefore, if you can save the 10, then you're way ahead on someone who can't. It's true to say we start to medium income, 25,000 a year here, say, to lower income, you will never pay off a house that's energy inefficient. It's just financially impossible to do so. So if you build for the poor, you must always make them energy efficient. So design is truly important. It's the single most important aspect of human settlements and the production of food from farms and of the farms themselves. We will show you designs which can double or quadruple crop production, and no fertiliser can do that. But design can do it. So we're selling a super fertiliser, really. And we're selling money here too. So then lastly, every element you place in a design should serve many functions. And none of those should be intrinsic functions. You don't put in a tree and say, well, it gives shade. Of course it gives bloody shade. Everything that gets in the way of the sun gives shade. That's an intrinsic function of a tree. So it should perform functions because of its placement. A good designer can place an element to do 5 things at once. And that's a super design. And if you can give 3 reasons why there's windows here, why are those windows there? And they're good reasons, not intrinsically to do with the fact you can see out or it lets light in, which all windows do. Or you can see it's coming up the path or something. Then you're a good designer. And I was thinking of something as we went around today. You know, I thought, I was performing 2 or 3 good functions. I've forgotten what it was or where it was. but you know, it's easy to place a pond, so it has at least 5 good functions. Now, so we'll tackle design, and this is a quite unique part of the course. I'll warn you when we come to a unique part of the course, because you won't be able to read about them anywhere else. And this discussion on design is unique to permaculture. Design, I say, has two elements that you recognise. One is aesthetic. A lot of people who are designers go around making beautiful somethings. And the other one is functional. There's no conflict between those things. A functional design can be as beautiful as a non-functional design. And permaculture design is the first system of conscious functional design in the world. That's its unique aspect. It's true, people say there's nothing new about permaculture. I say that's right. Nothing new about permaculture. There's really nothing new about anything. But functional design is a new aspect of this particular discipline. And functional design exists in very few areas of human endeavour. Engineering come closest, I guess. It's drifting away from its base to we concentrate on function under the box of those ethics. Function design is sustainable. We're early to use this word, which has been stolen by all sorts of idiots. There's one amazing, were you there, Scott, in Texas that time we went down to? Yeah. We went down to a meeting on sustainable agriculture hosted by Texas Department of Agriculture. The room was full of people from universities all over. Everybody worked in sustainable agriculture. And they said we could attend, we could sit around the walls of class and listen to their debates. It was sweet of them. And they gave us a thick sheaf of paper on what they were going to talk about. And then they invited me to speak. And everybody knows that's a pretty fatal thing to do, really. So I held up their thing and I said, this is full of bullshit. This big, thick issue they had. And they said, yeah, we know that, we were going to change it. So they excused that. I said, okay. They gave me 10 minutes to talk. And I said, what I want to know is, how do you define sustainable? And here are a lot of people from universities and ag colleges and things working in sustainable agriculture. So the answer was not forthcoming, you know. Then I did, you know, I am a very rude person. I took off my wristwatch and I set it up there. I gave him 4 minutes to answer, and nobody had answered. They were all whispering to the secretaries, you know, what is sustainable, you know. I said, okay, we've now established you don't know what is sustainable or what the word sustainable means, and you can't define it. And I said, well, the last question I have for you is, do any of you have an example of a sustainable agriculture? And then we gave them another 4 minutes, and I couldn't answer that question. I said, well, I don't think we have anything to learn here. You're here to talk about something you cannot define and of which you have no example. So what can you teach anybody? And as I say, that's, you know, really dangerous to ask me to talk at your local Parents and Friends Association or whatever. Sustainable system is any system that in its lifetime can produce more energy than it takes to establish and maintain it. So it's the second law of thermodynamics. It's inescapable. So if a house lasts a long time and has an excess energy export, then it may, in the end, pay its cost, its energy cost off. But very few buildings would do that. I think it's possible that the house built for the Rocky Mountain Institute may do so. It has quite a high energy export. But very few houses we build could be called sustainable.
It costs a fortune to build.
It cost a lot in its day to build. It was, yeah, it's nothing that the ordinary person could do. That's right. It had so much surplus energy in places. I remember the first time they hauled up the washing to dry it, I was there soon afterwards. The washing caught a light in 10 minutes up in the solar washing tanks. So all that, you hold up your trousers, ash drifts down. You know.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I overdid it a bit in places. But that's good. I mean, nothing wrong with that. So a house can be energy productive, and it's been able to build. We've been able to build such houses since the late 50s. We just haven't built them. Whole suburbs of Melbourne, city in Victoria, were built to be energy efficient in the mid-60s. They have a little problem. They have excessive winter heat, and they have to have big opening, high opening vents. But they're a little bit too damned efficient. But most houses, you have to burn something to heat them and fan something to cool them. Refrigerate to cool them and burn to heat them, and they eat energy. Back in the early 80s, they relocated a town here in the States because of flooding. That particular town voted to relocate itself, and it voted to institute an energy minimum on the houses built of 60%. And they easily achieved it, you know, saving or generating 60% of their own energy. And it was only the bank that didn't do it and refused to do it, so they closed the bank down until it did. And it did too. So that was the first I ever heard about it. But increasingly, local councils have, and well, a second good example in America is the city of Davis. It's illegal to build any paved areas that are not 60% shaded. You can't build a car park with no shade on. You can't do a Walmart in Davis. It's illegal to have an unshaded west wall. So you can't set up heat sources within the built environment, and you can't overheat your house so you have to cool it. It's actually illegal to have a window in your west wall. And it's illegal to go to work if you can carry on your job at home.
David.
Yeah. Davis is down to 13% of its previous energy use. Now, in the middle of Sydney is a council called Leichhardt, One of our graduates is a town planner for Leichhardt, and she has just had legislation passed governing any further developments or buildings in Leichhardt. And they're tighter than that. You've got to hit 90% energy efficiency. You've got to catch all your own water. You can't, nothing's going to be piped into your house. Now, all developers have to meet those standards, because local councils simply cannot go on piping water, energy, sewage to every house built, because it does not pay back. It's that simple. You know, so you can totally self-energise your community. You'll see, we were looking the other day, we saw an ice house back here. What was it called? It was community freezer. And every town in Texas had it. You went in, you had a little key, you unlocked a door, which is a slide, and pulled it out. They were a double row, and you could have hanging things for hanging game, or a chiller out front. And once a week you went there and brought home to your little deep freeze that what you wanted for the next week. But it's really simple to fund one large deep freeze as against, 300 individual freezers. So if you can get the heavy energy users, that we just mentioned them both, the washing machine, the dryer and the deep freeze, out of the houses, then it's very easy and very cheap to fully energise those houses. Then in Denmark, the next step is the village itself then co-invests in a large wind machine which feeds the grid. A big three later, sits about 100 yards from the nearest house behind the village, and it pumps out all the energy the village could use. Now, that's sold to the grid. The elderly build totally energy efficient houses, 100%, and buy a share in the wind machine and live off the income of the energy. And I met 2 or 3 households whose income was purely that of energy sales. So it's really a different way of thinking about your whole damn life, actually. He talks about negawatts, not megawatts, negawatts, the watts you don't have to use. Yeah, negawatts. That I would like you to think about making money from the things that cost you. Instead of you having to pay out 30% on energy, your income is from energy as a group of people. It's pretty silly to do it as an individual. You'll never hear the word self-sufficiency mentioned in this course, nor will you read it in my books. There's no point in self-sufficiency. Community interdependence is a way to go. If you all try to power your own house, it's going to cost so much, it'll never amortise. But if you set up a wind machine anywhere in which you can invest, you can amortise the energy cost of your house. And it's extremely cheap because you don't have storage batteries. You're just part of a general generating thing right across the country, feeding the whole grid right across the country, and you're contributing really to reducing everybody's energy bills. So it makes a lot of sense to use your group power. If you can't do that, you're dead. If you can't work together, I don't see any real chance of a reasonable future. There is no such chance. So you either co-invest or die, cooperate or die. But it is the same in nature and everywhere else. What if our individual selves started to argue for independence from each other? We wouldn't last long. Yeah, something like that. Cancer is equivalent of getting rich. Functional design should have a good product yield. or a surplus yield of product. There are lots of, you've got to stand back from something like food to see it. You know, if we have at least 3 million hectares of lawns in America. Those lawns take more fertiliser than all of your agriculture in totality. But they use a lot more horsepower than the agriculture does. And they use most of the biocides, weedicides and sprays. So your lawns are larger than all of your agriculture, including the agriculture of India and Africa. So now, don't sit there and tell me you can't grow your food in your cities. You can. You can grow your food in your settlements easily. Yeah, there's an unforgettable moment when you wander around. I was addressing a crowd in Bristol, and I said, you can all be growing your food where you now got your lawns in England. And they said, oh, we couldn't do that, and besides, you won't get the English to change it. Old woman stood up and said, if you'd been here in the war, we changed in weeks. As soon as they started to torpedo all our food and we got hungry, everybody went out, dug up their lawn, and within 6 weeks, we were eating our own salads, and within 12 months, we were feeding ourselves. I said, so take no notice of this idiot, she said. Yeah. You can change, and you will change. It's always nicer to change in a voluntary way than in that involuntary way where you're at the brink of starvation before you see the need to change. So it's better if somebody, in a sense, legislates a change in your neighbourhood, and you've got to change. You will change. We will all change. Now, so when you want to test if there's a good design, you say, why did you put that there? And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be a door, a window, a dog, a tree. Why is that there? And you have to have 3 or 4 bloody good reasons for it. And what essential functions is that component supporting? So what you're doing, you're putting together living machines, machines in which people live. Nothing may move, may not be a machine with a moving part which is mechanical, but the sun moves, the wind moves, water moves, and it may intercept those movements skillfully to provide you with all your needs. So it's a biological machine. It's a living, a place that will respond to the elements to protect you so you can live there. Now, if you've got an all-electric home and I clip the wires, you can't live there. You can't even live inside the house. Your toilet won't flush anymore, for one thing. You have to go outside, light a fire and get in a tent. So I can't believe I tried to live in that thing. No, it was never intended for human occupation. Right. Product yields are basically about 4% of us keep all the rest of us running. All essential services are covered by 4% of humanity. That's stretching it a little, probably 3%. It's not really an essential service to get a massage. So all your food can be produced, all your energy systems maintained by a very small number of people in your community. Or you can rotate through that function, so you have to spend 2 years of a 100-year life producing food. You know, sort of, what's the word, national service. It takes you 1 day in a bush mill to cut all the timbers for one house. So 1 day in your lifetime you make care to make yourself a house. Two years in your lifetime you make care to feed yourselves for life. That is no cost, further cost of feeding you. I doubt whether you could actually work up to 3 years. We'll give examples later where to earn your income for the year costs you at least 5 days a month. We'll be talking about those systems. So most of the time, people are going to work, 9 to 5 sort of work. They're not doing a damn thing, really. Just make work. And most school teachers know they're running a vast babysitting system. That's all they're doing.
Folding pins.
Yeah, carrying little bits of paper one to the other. Trying to make it look important because you've got to supposedly work an 8-hour day or a 9-hour day for a 5 or a 6 day week. So you've got to appear to be busy. If you didn't have to appear to be busy, you could go home most days. So most of us are out there trying to look as though we're busy. And honestly, what we do most of the time is make work, make inessential work. But that means that only 2% of us gardening at any one time can easily feed all of us. And it's a trivial exercise. It's not difficult at all. It would take you about half an hour to teach somebody to plant how to plant 6 months' food. It takes them 40 minutes to plant it. See how long it takes you to go down to Walmart and come back. So in the same time as it takes you to go and shop at Walmart, you could have planted 6 months' food and never go back to Walmart again. So it's trivial. It's a trivial exercise to design energy-efficient housing. There's so much of it now, it works so well, it's really trivial. We're not talking about things which are intellectually difficult or physically difficult to do. And if you got your gardening over with between, say, the ages of 18 and 20, and spend an extra day and cut yourself a house, or made enough bricks to build that house, and that take 1 day for a 2-storied house, you more or less finished work as far as housing and food goes. And if your house is energy efficient, you'll finish work there. So then you think, what did I really want to do with my life? Certainly it wasn't sit in some oversized car crate, paying it off your whole life. Is that what you wanted to do with your life? No, you can't imagine possibly what it is you would like to do with your life. Certainly not paying off rubbish. It's rather amusing to think about a house. Your great-grandfather builds a solid brick house and he dies. You decide, as there's 8 of you, you'll sell the house and take the money, so you do. Then someone comes along and they have to buy the house. Meanwhile, it's going to cost them more than what it cost your great-grandfather because it cost him very little. So they're charged double for it, so they pay for it double again. But what they're getting is exactly the same house, and it's slightly deteriorated. And then it goes on sale after sale after sale. If you talk to land agents, they'll point to houses which they personally have sold 8 or 9 times. And every time it costs more and more and more. And those houses which start off at $9,000 in Grandpa's day get up to $250,000. Same old house, been paid for a lot of times.
Called a pyramid scheme.
It is. You have to draw back from it all and think about it, because why in the hell would you ever pay for anything again? Your great-grandfather paid for it. You don't have to pay for it. But if you want to go on paying and paying and paying and increasing the amount you pay, you spend your whole generations of people spend their whole lives paying for things which were paid for when they were built. Except in some cultures they don't. Like, just back from Austria, people live in houses their great-grandfathers built. They don't pay a penny for that house. You're just born into the thing. You know, there's 20 or 30 of the family lived there. They've always lived there the last 5,000 years. The house doesn't cost you anything. Your job doesn't cost you anything. It's all there, and it's about all to end. So we had it right. You didn't waste your life paying for something which took, less than a year. My grandfather built a house for a bet in 2 days, and it's still standing.
For a bet?
For a bet. Yeah. Took me a week. My old fellows are pretty cluey. Now, when you look at a whole system, there are 2 things very undesirable in the system. One is work and the other one is pollution. But as soon as you see work, you will get pollution. Pollution is a product of work. Work is a result of not supplying every component of your system with its needs. Let's put that in way. If you didn't put a tank on your chicken house, you've got to carry water to the chickens. So you incur work when you've not designed a way in which the components of your system can attend to their own needs. Now, if you don't collect the eggs from the chicken house, that's pollution. So pollution is an unused resource. It didn't go somewhere where it would be used. So, but if you collect the eggs, they're no longer a pollutant, they are a resource. And so it goes. So work and pollution are both faulty design symptoms. So that will lead us later to methodologies of design. Again, design has not been defined by people. We've defined it here. We design for functional relationships in whole systems that'll save energy. If we fail in design, we'll incur work and we will certainly incur pollution. I live in a fortunate place because not knowing what I was doing, I put it together as best I knew, and I can go away for 8 months, 9 months, come back. It is simply better. Nothing has gone wrong. Nothing is causing pollution. It is simply better. So it's quite a pleasure to go away because when you go back, say, wow, that is a lot more jackfruit. So if you are even reasonably competent, you can design systems in which work finishes and pollution finishes soon after you start. You have to put in energy to anything to start it, anything. And after you've done that, it should last a long, long time without any further work. The swale, we'll stop. We'll go down the hill one day and we'll look at a swale put in here in 1933, and it's functioning as good as the day it went in. And all over America, these constructs, the CCC constructs, are there quietly functioning. Nobody's ever made any rehabilitative work on them. So I think they'll probably last for another 200-300 years. There's some water systems in Spain have been used in irrigation for about 1,000 years. They're still functioning extremely well. So some of the systems you can build will have a very long duration. If, by the way, when they put the swale in, they put a line of olive trees along it, they would simply be getting better in the next 800 years because an olive tree will last as long as a swale. We can locate olive trees which we think are older than 1,000 years, and they're in good condition. And 3 trees will provide all your lighting, all your cooking oils, and all your soaps and shampoos for a family. So do you have time to put in 3 olive trees in your whole life? It's a whole 6 or 8 minute job. I put several hundred in this year, just in case I miscalculate. I never trust my calculations. Really very funny thing to do. I bought this cattle farm, and at the time, cattle worth about $800 a head off farm, but they went down to $100 for a Hereford cow and calf recently because of drought. But I generously left it at $800. The farm had 56 cattle on it. I kicked the cattle off. I said, I'm going to put 56 things worth $800 there. It ended up as being 24 sticks of bamboo, are worth exactly the same. 60 mango trees, worth exactly the same. Yeah. Mango bears about 1,000 fruit, worth $2 each. So every tree, every year, is worth as much as a cow. But you don't have to hoot it about and cart hay to it. You just have to go and pick the mangoes up. So I went on like that. You know, 1/4 of an acre of silver perch is worth the same price as all those cattle on 175 acres. So suddenly I realised I was about to get filthy rich. You know, I put in 600 mango trees, not 60. I put in thousands of bamboo. You know, I could find 58 fish ponds. So who wants all that money? I mean, I could be in deep trouble. I mean, I could get awfully insecure if I had all that money. I might even have to employ a security service or something. Guard my mango forest. So then I thought how shockingly uneconomic it was to run cows. It really blocked a lot of people from making money. And that's a fact. Yeah.
How's it designed? It's designed for destruction.
It is. It's a kind of way of retaining ownership of large areas of land without actually doing anything at all, except turning cows out and getting some back occasionally. It's a way to mark your land. You brand the cows and let them go where they are, that's your land sort of business. It's not really any way to treat country. When somebody says, I'm keeping cattle, I say, well, you're working at the bottom of the trophic land. You know, you really don't make much out of doing that. Okay. So you can get an awfully good product yield if you think it out, and if you cost it out, you can be very economical with very small expenditure of effort. Granted, you have to wait 6 years to your first mango crop. This was my first mango crop. I remember meeting a friend years ago. I said, what do you do? He said, growing lettuces. And I said, well, hell. He said, yep, every week I put in enough lettuces for a week. And I said, that's bad luck, Bob. He said, well, don't know. He said, I worked it out. While I've been growing lettuces, I've been planting trees. And he said, in year 3, I can stop growing lettuces and pick my first crop of fruit, and that year I'm a millionaire. But every year thereafter, I'm much more than a millionaire. And that's exactly what happened. He used his lettuces to buy his trees, plant his tree, to supply Cairns with tropical fruit. There was no other supplier. On the first year his fruit came in, he was a millionaire. And stopped growing lettuces forever. So, you know, you've got to think about what you're doing, where you're going to go, how you want to spend your life. You know, whether you want to spend your life planting, 50 or 100 trees, or whether you want to spend your life running around after cows hooting and yelling and cracking your whip, forever. Whether you want to be relatively affluent or relatively poor. I had a marvellous trip a few months ago. I went to Vietnam. Vietnam has instituted permaculture as its official agriculture. It's total. Sustainable systems as its official policy. Farmers I met, remember one man, Mr. Meyer in the Delta, he said, our family was sick, we're under communism, we had to produce rice, and it's all we produced, and all we had to eat was rice and salt. We were all ill, we had very little energy. I said, rice is not a food really, you just forget it. I said, okay, well then we were told to become permaculturists, and now 5 sorts of carp, I've got prawns here bigger than crayfish, we hardly eat rice at all, it's a shit food. I said, yeah, well just send it to the freaks in the West. They think it's good food. It's actually starch, you might as well eat starch. As white rice. I said, export it. He said, I'm going to give it right up, it's just not healthy for people. And he grown sweet potatoes as a ground cover, perennial ground cover, digs all he wants every year, but it's still always there. He's got about 6-tier agriculture with, coconuts up top and vanilla beans and stuff got over coconuts, coffee dotted along. And he got 400 square metres. He said, I am now a rich man. I said, how do you define that? So, well, I've got a radio and a bike and a black and white television. That makes me awfully rich farmer in Vietnam. They said, I've got all the time in the world and lots of excellent food. And he said, I feel rich. I'm very wealthy. So he said, I've been able to lend money to my neighbours, farmers, other poorer farmers. I've been able to bring them here and give them all sorts of plants to take home, which will put them in the same wealth category as me. And I've been here, some of them here working around with me, young farmers. So I'm teaching them exactly how to get rich. They said, nobody's sick in my family anymore. We have excellent diet, So, it made me very happy. And he was in his 4th year from rice. So when you design well, there's neither work nor pollution. When you design well, another thing which is also extraordinarily intriguing, when you design well, nature takes hold of what you've done and does it better. All you've got to do is watch the system and guide it slightly. If you make a mistake to start with, it compounds as time goes on. There's a lot of jargon in ecology and in design. We'll discuss a few things. Resources is used often. We've discussed sustainability. You know what sustainability is. Any system which conserves or generates the energy it costs to build and maintain it. Something that can make itself. Now, Mr. Ma's farm, because it's there, can make lots of other farms. So it can go on building farms just like itself year after year now. So it's hit the criteria for sustainability. And it's a wonder of connection. He feeds his pigs, they crap in the canal, the prawns eat the pig crap, on goes the water, the carp eat the algae, it goes through clean up marshes and goes back into the stream it came from. So, the whole thing is really connected right through this whole huge 400 square metres. Yeah, 400 square metre farm, 20 metres by 20 metres. Yeah, it's a reasonable farm for the Delta. Resource is energy stored in a useful form. Now, there are enormous fluxes of energy through all real-world systems. The sun comes up, comes over, goes through. Rain falls, water runs through your system. So how are you going to store those energies in a useful form? And if the sun heat is in your floor and radiating softly all night or through the dark days of winter, then you've made a resource out of sunlight. If the water is in a 10,000 gallon or a 20,000 gallon, two 10,000 gallon tanks under or near your house, you've provided your water for the year from the water that was running away of the landscape. If you stop it in the landscape and put a sub-irrigation under your forests, you will never have to water those forests again. So it's what are you doing to make resources? There's a funny little diagram in the bottom. It's really, there's a source of energy wherever it is. There's your site in the middle with that little network. Resources coming through your site. How many storages can you set up? Useful storages can you set up? And if you do a fairly good job there, then your work is finished in a way. And there are other things will help you set up storages, beavers, unpaid slaves, you know. As far as water storage goes, you know, just give me 4 beavers rather than a bulldozer any day.
It's hard to tell them where to put it, though.
No, you got to take it where it
Take
goes.
it where they put it.
Yeah, it's going to be where water can be held. That's where they'll put it. But it's real easy to feed them. You can just get a great sheaf of poplars under your arm and go stick them in on the creek, you know, and that's it forever. So you just got to feed the slaves a bit. Don't put your apple trees where the beavers come, and they don't go far from water. It's just really close to water. Put your apple trees a little further away than the beaver goes. So what your job is to set up as many resources, useful storages within the system as you can. So your resource creation is your job. How are you going to turn waste products into resources? These are all thoughts you've got to have. When people first started to think about natural systems, they saw a relationship between the diversity of the system and the stability of the system, whether it would continue. Obviously, this hill from top to bottom, down till we get down the fences, is totally stable, you know, self-reproducing, self-maintaining system, which generally slowly enriches itself. As soon as we cross the fence down there, we're in a totally different system. So what are the factors that make one a system that builds resources and one in which resources are slowly trickling away? The oak trees are dying, the gullies are eroding, the streams are increasingly polluted. Is it just the diversity? So they said there is a relationship between diversity and stability. And the mathematical symbol you would use for that is a curious little squiggle. The diversity is in some way related to stability. There's no doubt there is a relationship. A diverse system generally doesn't collapse as disastrously as some form of monoculture. We have lots of real-life examples of the collapse of oversimplified systems, like the Irish potato famine, which is sort of the first time in history that people really relied on one crop for their living, you know, and of course it is...
Non-indigenous crop.
Well, indigenous or not, you know, never in history have we actually ever before relied on a single crop. And not necessarily their fault. They're at the same time producing under contract to England plenty of wheat. They didn't have a famine, they just didn't get the access to food, that's all. They died. What is that relationship? And I think people still can argue about that. Diversity of species, the correct term for that is the richness of the system. That's the correct ecological term. When a system has a lot of species living in it, it is a rich system. When there's few species living in it, it is a poor system. And richer it is, in some way, the more stable it is. But then we've considerably modified this. You know, I think I was one of the early modifiers. These are all totally different components of a design system. You can make them any shape you want, you know. Is it the number of different things in the system that is a stability, or is it the beneficial relationship between these things? So is it the number of these or the number of these? Number of these or the number of these? It's really the number of beneficial connections that impart stability. So that means you can get stability with relatively few components in the system. And you can get more and more stability if you can think of more connections to add. So it means you can sort of, you know, if you've got good connections here and there, some of these can break, the stability of the system will apparently be unaffected. It will be weakened, but you would never notice that it was. So it's the way the interactions go that give the system the stability, not the number of things in it necessarily. And yet I think, going back to richness, in all systems there are two levels. The system can get too poor and then goes all on its own to extinction, and it can get too rich and goes all on its own to a slightly simpler but more functionally integrated state. And both those things happen. We've got evidence for both in nature. We have evidence that systems left alone, like some of the sand dune country we have, slowly degrade to, you know, sort of impoverished shrublands. Deserts, which we've overcleared and start to leak badly, wash off and run away, slowly degrade to true sandy deserts. And, you know, they're on their way. Leave them alone, it's too late to leave them alone. Leave them alone, they will just go all on their own, they'll run down to nothing. Australia's been described by some ecologists as a leaking continent. Leaking continent. It's like a tyre with a constant bleed in it. It will just go flat all on its own. So much nutrients, so much silt, so much dust is being lost in the continent that if you don't interfere now, it will just quietly go down to total desert. It will proceed, in a sense, to abolish itself.